You want to get into fixing cars, but you don't know what tools you need? Well, let me help you with that. Now, this video is no way condoned or sponsored by anybody, but this is what I personally would buy. Before we even get onto hand tools, you need to be able to lift a car safely. Cars come with a jack. It's for changing a tyre at best. I would never risk going under a car on one of those. They call them suicide jacks or widowmakers for a reason. So yeah, we'll keep that for changing a tyre at the side of the road, nothing more. Personally, I'm in the UK, so there's a company called SGS Engineering. In the US, you've got Harbour Freight who do, reasonably priced tools. I personally have a 2.5 ton, the slim version, trolley jack. Like nothing fancy. They do aluminium ones. You don't need any of that when you're starting out. I think 120 quid when they're on offer. Perfect. It's going to lift 99% of, it'll lift a Range Rover, it'll lift anything. But slimline means it will fit under most stuff. The problem you find with most cheaper jacks is they're quite chubby. They don't fit under things. So yeah, ideal. And at minimum, a pair of axle stands. Again, minor SGS. There is other brands available, but these are reasonable. I think they're like 50 quid a pair. I'll have to check. I'll put it as a little thing. There is there's probably more than two types, but the two main types are the ratcheting ones, which in an ideal world are not the best. However, the SGS ones have a locking pin, which means you can lock them out, so you can't accidentally kick them and drop the car on you. And then there's the other type, which is just a tube with a pin, pretty simple. And then on top of that, I'd obviously always put the spare wheel, the wheel you've taken off, under the car as well. So, we're not dropping things on ourselves. So yeah, kind of safety 101, get a decent trolley jack and a pair of axle stands. And then we can go on to actual tools. Now, the main bulk of the tools you are going to kind of have on cars are undoing fasteners. There's the traditional 6-sided hex bolt. We've got Torx, we've got Allen, we've got E-Torx. It's we're not endless, but there's quite a few. You're going to need something to turn those out. Generally, sockets come in 3 flavours. They have 1/4 inch, which is the small. They have 3/8, which is kind of the middle. And then they have 1/2 inch, which is the big. When you work on lorries and trucks and stuff, there's obviously bigger than that. There's 3/4 inch, there's inch, and then, the bigger. But day-to-day cars, this is kind of what you're going to come across. I've got, that's the first ratchet I ever bought when I worked on cars. I still have it. It's dying a bit. One thing I recommend is always buy half decent ratchets to start with. If you can get them with a warranty, in the UK we have Halfords, which their advanced stuff has unlimited warranty. So if you break it, you take it back. I just haven't got round to it. I've got a couple of those. They're pretty good. They're pretty cheap. They're nicely built. One thing you'll find with cheap ratchets is the ratchet is very coarse. And if you're stuck up in somewhere and you're trying to do a very fine turn, sometimes you want a nice fine ratchet. So yeah, they're, for the money. You've got companies like Snap-on, Mac, if you want to spend big money, but I guess this is kind of going for people that are just starting or just want to do a bit at home. So I've also got these mini sets. I bought this in America from God knows where when I didn't have a tool set with me. So, just having that in a car will get you out of most stuff. So yeah. And then we've got obviously extensions. They come in all multitudes of sizes. You can get wobble end ones, you can get straight ones, you can get all sorts. One thing I would say, don't buy this type. Don't buy the ones with they have a button for unlocking. Utter rubbish. Don't ever buy those. But again, Halfords in the UK do them. If you're doing very occasional car work, we have Machine Mart as well. A lot of my sockets, when I was very, very, young and started, came from Machine Mart. Socket sets like 15 quid. It'll do you to start with. Just quickly going through, I have a plethora of sockets going on in this toolbox. It's ridiculous. But just when you start out, a simple set of 3/8 sockets, 1/2 inch sockets, maybe a shallow, maybe a deep, it'll get you out of most stuff. Like a Halford starter set, perfect. I've got, we've got E-Torx, we've got standard Torx, Allen. you know, buy the basics, and then as and when you need something, buy the set. Again, I've got bigger sockets for specific jobs, and you know, things like a lambda sensor, and, you know. But yeah, as I say, buy the simple and then go from there. On top of a basic toolkit, I would personally have a breaker bar for undoing things that are especially tight, especially wheels, because people love to gun them up. You know, you can get long ratchets, you can get all, you know, if you think of it, they've probably made it. But as we're beginning, breaker bar, one of each ratchet, easy peasy. And then also, I would personally recommend torque wrenches. They don't have to be fancy ones. These are Halfords. You can get much cheaper ones. They're probably not the most accurate, and you probably don't want to be building engines with them. But for learning how tight things should be, really good place to start. You know, you don't get a feel for how bolts should be tightened unless something teaches you. This is the perfect thing to teach you, because it clicks off when a fixing, of which all have a spec on a car, is reached. So yeah, a pair of torque wrenches, job done. I'm guessing the kind of people that are watching this video are going to be modifying their cars as well as fixing them. Again, people modify their cars, probably going to change the suspension. Really nice to have is a through socket set. Name suggests they are through sockets. That means you can undo something like a trap rod end and hold the Allen key or whatever's inside of it when you undo it. Also, things like top mounts, you can put, you know, Allen key in the middle, wind it out at the same time. Nice to have. Not horrendously expensive, but again, if you know, these kind of tools make your life easier than harder. It's worth noting that ratchets are appropriately sized for the fixing they undo. And by that I mean 1/2 inch is probably going to be used on, let's say, 17 mil. We're talking head, not bolt size. 17 mil head to maybe 13. You're going to need a lot more leverage because it's a bigger bolt. 3/8, you know, somewhere in the maybe 10 to 17 mil headed bolt range, smaller. And then 1/4 inch is for your fine stuff, maybe 10 mil and below. The same applies for spanners, which we'll get onto in a second. So yes, you can get adapters for the wrong way around, but when you're first learning, use the appropriate tool for the fixing size, and then you're probably not going to start stripping threads off things because you're over tightening them. Well, you might still, but we've got to start somewhere, haven't we? Spanners, or wrenches if you're in America, box wrenches, I don't know what it's called. So again, as we were saying, they are appropriately sized for the fixing that they undo. So a 16 is a fair size. That means pushing on this end here means that it's very hard to over tighten a 16 mil bolt unless you're a He-Man. These come in all kinds of, again, like sockets. You've got your standard non-ratcheting, bog standard ratchet. You've got things like flare wrenches. These are designed for like brake lines and fittings, fuel lines, kind of reducing the chance that you'll round something off. I mean, in an ideal world, when everything's new, it's quite nice to put together, but the stuff we work on in the UK is generally quite crusty, so things like this really help you out. You also have ratcheting versions, which, you know, it's in the name. Again, funny enough, Halfords. What else have I got? The reason I have so many spanners is because those are Imperial. This is the rest of that set. And then in the back, we've got some old, I think they're RS. These are horrendous things. I acquired these at JLR years ago. They're horrible. I don't know why I kept them. I've got a set of Imperial ratchet spanners somewhere from America because they're half the price. And then, you know, over time, as and when I've needed stuff, you end up with things like a 38. I think that's the track rod inner on a BMW F10, I think is why I have that. And then you have your classic adjustable spanner, or what do they call them? Stilson? No, not Stilson. I can't remember what they're called in America. But these again come in 3, 4, 5 different sizes. If you're going to chuck a toolkit in your car, I'd put one of these in. They get you out of the shit. And then we move on to the message drawer of the toolbox. Screwdrivers and kind of Allen keys. You can buy a basic set from most places when it comes to screwdrivers. A couple of things I'd recommend. If you're going to hit things, which I wouldn't recommend because they're screwdrivers, not chisels, you want to get the through ones, which have, as you know, as the name suggests, they're metal all the way through, so you're not going to knacker the handle. But just a, there's no point buying expensive screwdrivers. Just a selection of flathead screwdrivers and Phillips screwdrivers. There's a set of Torx ones at the back, and then also in this drawer I've got trim clip tools. They're not expensive. I mean, in the world we're in now, trip on Amazon, 2-3 quid for one of those, easy peasy. And then also in this drawer, picks again, just a cheap set because you're probably going to break them. They're good for things like O-rings and connectors and loads of stuff. And then, just over time, I've gained, small screwdrivers and bits. And then we've got Allen key sets. It's never ending, isn't it? So yeah, that's the screwdriver set. Then it's my favourite drawer of the toolbox, the persuasion drawer, or the hammer drawer, or the Brummy spanner drawer, whatever you want to call it. They come in all shapes and sizes, but when we begin, you probably want, that's just a standard ball-peen hammer. What more? And then as and when you get on, you want, soft mallets and copper hammers. Generally the rule when you're hitting things working on cars is you hit it with something that's softer than it. So if you're hitting something that's steel, in an ideal world, you hit it with something that's copper or, an aluminium hub or something. You probably don't want to hit because you'll mark it and deform it. But something like a drive shaft, which is steel as well, copper. Obviously, you're going to have to hit some things, like a hub, like a steel hub, you can hit with a hammer. You're probably going to damage it slightly or mushroom it slightly, but it depends on the application. But you don't want to go smacking the hell out of things and deforming things with, a hammer that's completely inappropriate. Hence why we have so many. Lump hammer when it all gets too much. What are they called? I can't remember what they're called. It's like a Baraka hammer. Dead blow hammer, that's it. Tight little hammers, all sorts. And then we get into hammers for dollies for bodywork. But, starting out, just buy yourself a standard ball-peen hammer. Like, nothing crazy. You don't want one of the ones you use in your house that have got the hook on the back. Bad, because, you can hurt yourself. Just a bog standard hammer. I've kind of covered the basics. We can lift a vehicle and support it safely. We've got sockets, extensions, ratchets to be able to undo fixings, screwdrivers for screws. That kind of covers the, what you would buy to start with. And then from this point, you're going to start buying things as and when you need them. I'm going to go over some tools now that would be a nice addition to the basic tools that you will build up over time that kind of make life a lot easier. On modern cars, you will find a lot of trim clips. Most interior panels are held on with them now. As mentioned in the screwdriver drawer, trim tools come in all shapes and sizes. These are kind of like a metal, screwdriver type, pardon me. You don't really want to use those on like metal doors because they scratch. If you're going to do that, wrap them in tape. But also they make them in plastic. They do all sorts of shapes, sizes, take your pick. A set of these is like £5. They're dirt cheap. Always a nice thing to have. If you're going to start working on engine, brakes, you're going to need some sort of clamps to stop things leaking. They do all sorts. They do, this type. I've got metal ones that clamp, bigger versions. You kind of accumulate all this stuff as you work on cars. This is just what I have and works for me. Going back briefly to the hitting things subject, I have a selection of drifts and chisels. Again, you can buy a set of these for not very much. They come in all different sizes. Over time, you'll notice that you peen the end over. Always wear safety glasses when you're using stuff like this because there's nothing worse than that chipping off and getting in your eye. Aluminium drifts, so drive shafts, if you're going to smack them out, you don't want to mushroom the thread on the end, so aluminium. So yeah, they come in all shapes and sizes. There's no point buying the expensive versions of things like that because you're just going to hit them and mess them up. So get cheap and cheerful ones when you're starting out. Being in the UK, you'll find there's a lot of salt on our road, so most of the cars you work on will be rusty and crusty and horrible. So, a plethora of wire brushes to get that gunk off when you're working on suspension. They come in like drill type ones. They come in angle grinder type ones. That's a paint removal one, but there's a wire one. Yeah, you can never have too many wire brushes. Again, cheap and cheerful. This has kind of turned into a toolbox tour, which is not what I intended, but I'll go with it. We've kind of moved into slightly more advanced tools now. Things like pullers. They do 3-legged pullers, you know, small, large, 2-legged pullers, wiper blade pullers. You know, things get stuck on. You need to be able to remove them without damaging them. These are the kind of tools I'm talking about that as and when you need them, you buy them. So hence why I have so many of the damn things. That kind of covers tools in the terms of like hand tools. You can also get, obviously, you know, impacts and ratchets and all sorts. And there's the whole debate of which manufacturer's the best and blah, 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 blah. Again, I have impacts and ratchets, but very rarely use them. I think the drill's probably the most used thing over there. Again, nice to haves, but not essential to start with. One thing I've started doing with now we have access to AliExpress and things are like super cheap, but I don't need them now, is being prepared for jobs that I might face in the future. You can get, you know, little sets of things like O-rings, like £2 when you buy them in China. These are kind of nice to haves around the garage because you don't have to then nip off to the hardware store to get an O-ring if you need one. You've kind of just got all sizes just lying around. You know, that's a ferrule set for crimping on wires. You know, more O-rings, things like house fuses, things like copper washers for when you've got, you know, drain plugs and things, and oil fittings, little screws. It's always useful, nice to have, and that's probably like 20 quid's worth. I mean, I've kind of been good and organised all this stuff, but yeah, have spares around. Things like trim clips and spare fuses, and you haven't got to spend the earth because, you know, we're luckily in this position now where things from China take less than a week to get here, so keep them on the shelf. I'm going to summarise because I've kind of gone slightly off on a tangent on advanced tools, but never mind. So yeah, to start with, decent trolley jack, axle stands. At least you're in a safe working situation. Socket set, 1/2 inch, 3/8, quarter, few extensions, maybe deep and shallow versions of all of those sockets. Ideally get the 6-sided versions of sockets because, as I say in the UK, things are crusty. 6-sided sockets are going to sit better on a 6-sided fixing. If you're working on something like a Mercedes, they've got 12-sided, you might want to buy 12-sided, but you know, you buy the tool that's appropriate for what you've got. And then along with some screwdrivers, a couple of hammers, you kind of set. I'd also probably buy a set of spanners. Again, the set I've got in there came as a set from Halfords. It's not expensive. And then when you progress, buy yourself a nice set of ratchet spanners, flexible ones, they do fixed ones, yeah, all sorts. This subject we could go on for hours. So yeah, that's kind of like your beginning. And then, you know, you've seen a few other bits and bobs that are available. You know, we'll see how this video goes. And if people want, we'll talk about more advanced stuff. We'll talk about welding. We'll talk about, you know, all sorts of bits and bobs. But for now, that is hopefully where you begin. If you've got any questions, chuck them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.